In the mid-90s, you couldn't turn your head without seeing a superhero. They took over our cartoons, trading cards, video games, Pizza Huts, and toy aisles. By 1999, the fall of the superhero had begun. Or maybe it wasn't so much the fall of the superhero as much as it was the rise of everything else. The toy industry's top companies were setting their sights on characters of different genres. Toy Biz put Spider-Man and X-Men in the background while it focused its efforts on video game superstars and World Championship Wrestling. Hasbro was chasing the Pokemon craze. No longer as concerned with Superman and Batman. Kenner was tied up with the Phantom Menace. Former staples like G.I. Joe, He-Man, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had already lost their shelf space at toy stores. 25 years have passed since 1999, and to commemorate the occasion, we're going to cover all the major toys to answer the question: what was it like to collect action figures in 1999? Just what could you find in stores? What couldn't you find in stores? And so much more with What Was It Like to Collect Action Figures in 1999? Before 1999, action figures based on video games were sparse at best. Mario himself hadn't had much going on. Now, owners of PlayStations, Nintendo 64s, and Sega would all have action figures to collect in 1999. Toy Biz video game Superstars line was growing, with the addition of Diddy Kong Racing. Darkstalkers 3, Marvel vs. Capcom, and Mario Kart Series 1. These figures were really well done, even by today's standards. In a rare instance, Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong would be produced by both Toy Biz and a new upstart, Toy Sight. Toy Sight's Donkey Kong series would only last for one assortment, though a second series was planned. Toy Sight had big plans for video game-themed figures, including a Mario's World assortment, featuring what would have been the first action figures for many Nintendo characters. At least some of their planned Zelda figures made it to collectors. What really blows my mind is they had even planned a Smash Brothers assortment, though pictures seem to have been lost in time. Mario's Sega rival Sonic would have figures made by company Resource Toys for Sonic Adventure. Resource was hyper-focused on video games in the late 90s, with releases of Street Fighter, Quake 2, and Duke Nukem. The company would go belly up by 2000, leaving their Gex and Guy from Final Fight unreleased. PlayStation loyalists would have Tomb Raider, Crash Bandicoot, and Final Fantasy VIII by Bandai. You may have found some of Toy Biz leftover Lara Croft figures on the shelves at KB Toys, and the imported Final Fantasy VII figures from the previous year. 1999's Blockbuster films were merchandised. Oh boy, were they merchandised. Austin Powers' The Spy Who Shagged Me was one of McFarlane Toys' first major hits. 4 of the top 5 grossing films of the year had toys. Sadly, no figures for the number 2. Toy Story 2 by Mattel, The Matrix figures by Into Toys, and others. These figures were great, but they didn't have anyone camping outside Toys R Us in hopes of acquiring one. That honor would be bestowed by action figures no collector on the planet could escape.
Well, it's a marketing dream.
Almost 400 people lined up in the cold drizzle at midnight to be the first to get their hands on the new Star Wars merchandise.
Fans and toy collectors lined up midnight last night to be the first to get their mitts on action figures, clothing, and other doodads.
1 minute past midnight, the Brandon Toys R Us store would open its doors. The occasion? The debut of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace toy line.
It's going to be since it was midnight. They're all real friendly and they're polite and they're taking their turns, no pushing or shoving or anything.
At midnight on May 3rd, you could find every Star Wars fan and their girlfriend standing outside in line at Toys R Us, waiting for anything Phantom Menace. Hasbro would produce 10 to 15 times the normal production run for the film to accommodate demand. Some would report needing full restocks before the film's theatrical release on May 19th. Now, the figures talk.
That they have these little chips, and somehow, let's see, can we get one to work here? Somehow, well, apparently not.
No toy had seen this much anticipation ever, outside of maybe the original Star Wars Kenner figures. Phantom Menace drew in collectors of all products, from every age group.
And when Star Wars Episode 1 came out, it was a big deal because Hasbro/Kenner, they did that midnight drop on all the figures and stuff like that. I was too young. I think I was 10 years old, so I couldn't go to a midnight drop at Toys R Us. But I do remember my mom taking me the very next day. They were definitely cleaned through. I remember watching it on the news, videos of all these people rushing into Toys R Us and just grabbing everything they could off the shelf. And I remember leaving with Darth Maul and Anakin Skywalker, and then they had like the Comtech reader.
Can we get one to work here? Somehow, well, apparently not.
Very cool, but it really didn't last. And honestly, once I saw the movie, I was like, yeah, I'm good on these.
While maybe not the most beloved, figures based on Phantom Menace are still being produced to this very day. Hasbro, the parent company responsible for Star Wars figures, had purchased company Kenner in 1991 and would phase out the branding and Kenner HQ in Cincinnati beginning in 1999. This change would be reflected in the ongoing Star Wars Power of the Force line, which were new figures based on the first trilogy. Phantom Menace, DC superheroes, and starting lineup, but now with Hasbro branding.
1999. Always checking out the starting lineup figures. Starting lineup figures that hadn't changed much since they dropped in the 80s. There was still something about them that had us trying to grab them, especially when we saw guys that we wanted. The retirement of Wayne Gretzky, the home run battle between Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire, all immortalized forever in starting lineup figures with like 4 points of articulation. Starting lineups, unfortunately, would go by the wayside, but I still, every time I see them, I get nostalgic and I want them.
Kenner's starting lineups tradition of producing professional athletes that don't actually look like the professional athletes would continue into 1999. NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, and NASCAR were easy finds in stores. NBA would pivot to Mattel from Hasbro, with more detailed basketball superstars. The recently retired Michael Jordan would have his own line of limited edition figures, called Maximum Air. Starting lineups, the brand, would largely be phased out 2 years later by Hasbro in 2001. When we come back, collecting Beyond Batman, Hulk Hogan on top again, Pokemon, and more.
The alien invasion has begun, and it's up to the 5 of us to stop them. Animorphs, transform us! We've been given an incredible power to morph into any animal we touch. I'm more than just Jake now. I'm changing with the ferocious power of the tiger. My hands becoming fierce claws. I'm Tobias, morphing from human to hawk. My wings forming for air attack. The evil aliens led by Visser 3 are here, and there's only one way to change his plan. Pounce like animals. Animorphs, each sold separately.
With everything else rising in popularity, superheroes wouldn't take up the retail space seen in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Hasbro was on autopilot with Batman Beyond. The new Batman Adventures and World of Batman, which included Dark Knight Batman figures painted in different ways. Superman must have been hiding out as Clark Kent throughout 1999, as Superman was only found in a JLA assortment. A variety of exclusives, and a 7-inch DC Superheroes assortment. Marvel's producer Toy Biz shifted focus by 1999. After spending the better part of the decade producing action figures under several banners, Superheroes, Uncanny X-Men, and Animated Spider-Man, Toy Biz would eye other licenses. The previously aforementioned video game superstars, Xena Warrior Princess, NASCAR, and wrestling. There would still be a small smattering of superheroes. Spider-Man, a first-time Avengers line, Alpha Flight, and first appearances. Marvel superheroes would make a crossover appearance thanks to the hit Marvel vs. Capcom. Marvel would get rejuvenated with the new X-Men film released in 2000. After-school staples and Saturday morning cartoons were making it to your favorite toy aisles. Power Rangers were in the Lost Galaxy era of the show, trying to recapture the popularity of the show and toys from the Mighty Morphin era. Dragon Ball Z was a huge hit with Cartoon Network viewers, and as a result, Irwin Toys produced and/or imported Bandai's Dragon Ball Z figures for US customers. There were over 10 different series released for DBZ in 1999. Nickelodeon was all the rage in the 90s, and yet so many of their popular shows would go without figures throughout the majority of the decade. Live-action TV Nick shows like Are You Afraid of the Dark?, Kenan and Kel, and All That did not have any toys produced. But animated shows like Cat Dog, as well as the Rugrats, would see retail with Mattel. SpongeBob SquarePants first premiered in May of 1999, though he wouldn't have any real toys to collect until 2002. Morning cartoons were an obvious choice for action figures. But what about nighttime TV hosts? Space Ghost was voted Figure of the Year by Toy Fair magazine. Speaking of hosts, MTV's Celebrity Deathmatch were shown at Toy Fair, but sadly did not get produced. No word on if MTV's Carson Daly was to receive a figure, but frequent number ones on Total Request Live got dolls. Speaking of MTV, Beavis and Butthead figures with speaking features released by More Action Collectibles, creators of Buffy the Vampire Slayer figures the same year. Action figures aren't everything. Simon says let's take a beat to remind ourselves of some honorable mentions of non-action figure toys your relatives probably bought you in 1999. Furby, Bop It Extreme, Game Boy Colors, the first Pokemon cards.
You want new Pokemon to capture?
Gotta capture them all! Captain Heavenly Pokemon! Poliwag, Poliwhirl, Poliwrath! Pokeball Blaster! I gotta capture all new Pokemon. And when I train them, I will be
Pokemon interest evolved in a way no one was expecting in 1999. Figures and toys would invade retail sections and Burger Kings. At retail, you would find Hasbro's imported Pokemon figures, previously only available in Japan, to sell at American retail stores, with their own branding, of course. Beginning around November 1998 and onward, these toys came out in battle packs, with Game Boy launchers and with trainers. Over 100 of the 151 first-generation Pokemon would be released over the next couple years, before Hasbro would move on to Pokemon's next evolution. And collectors set its sights on the next big craze: Burger King Pokemon toys. For those of us who couldn't get enough, Pikachusiasts, stay with me here, would drive their parents insane with over 57 different Pokemon toys and figures to collect over the course of about 2 months. From November 1999 to January 2000, it would have required going to Burger King once a day for every day and getting a unique toy each and every time you order in order to catch them all. Did you collect all 57? Spoiler, nobody did.
The year is 1999. I'm 19 years old. I'm out of the wrestling figure collecting game until I see these on the shelves. The WCW Smash and Slam figures made by Toy Biz. The whole set still holds up in 2024. And remember, when you're NWO for life.
A leading toy magazine of the time, Tomart's Action Figure Digest kept track of the top 10 best-selling brands with every new issue. In 1999, the top 3 of the top 10 best brands were dominated by Star Wars and pro wrestling's WWF and WCW promotions. Toy Biz WCW and Jakks Pacific's WWF would battle for the number 1 spot on television and in the toy aisles. You could find WWF's Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, and WCW's Hollywood Hulk Hogan, Sting, and Goldberg figures pretty much anywhere with a retail peg. Going beyond the mat, first-time entrance stages for your wrestling figures. There should be no doubt that 1999 was an explosive year for action figures. And what you might not have considered, nearly every single one of these properties is still being produced in action figure form nearly 25 years later in 2024. The sequel to 1999, the year 2000, would bring more of the same, with companies expanding on last year's hits, and one family taking residence at retail. Should we cover what it was like to collect action figures in 2000? Hey, it's been a while. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this retrospective, check out our other action figure history videos. You can also grab yourself a deal from one of our shops. And be sure to follow us on all those socials to see what we're up to next.